The grand piano stood like an ebony island in Elias Novak's apartment, dust collecting on keys that hadn't been touched in 18 months. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Meridian City's lights created a symphony of color against the night, a visual melody that mocked his silence. Elias ran his fingers through his unkempt hair, then traced the scar that ran from his right temple to just behind his ear. The accident had taken more than just his hearing for 3 months. It had stolen the music that once played constantly in his mind. "Happy birthday to me," he whispered to the empty apartment, lifting a glass of whiskey toward the framed music awards that lined his wall. At 34, the once celebrated composer now taught theory classes at the local university. Speaking of harmonies he could no longer feel, his phone vibrated. A text from Maya, his agent. The symphony called again. "They're willing to extend the deadline for the spring concerto. Just give me something. Anything." Elias didn't respond. The thought of forcing notes onto paper made his stomach twist. The doctors called it musical anhedonia, a neurological interruption between hearing and feeling. The notes made sense intellectually, but the emotional connection had vanished with the crash. Draining his glass, grabbed his coat and headed out into the night. Meridian's coastal air carried the salt of the sea as Elias walked familiar streets. Passing bars where jazz spilled onto sidewalks and clubs where bass thumped against windows. He felt the vibrations but couldn't connect with them. His feet carried him to the cliffs overlooking the ocean, spot where he'd once come for inspiration. Tonight the moon hung low over the water, casting a silver path across the waves. Elias sat on a weathered bench and closed his eyes, trying to remember how it felt when music flowed through him. "You won't find it by looking backward," came a voice behind him, startled. Elias turned to find an old man with white hair and eyes that seemed too bright for his weathered face. "Excuse me?" "The music," the old man said, settling beside him uninvited. "It's not behind you in memory. It's ahead, waiting to be discovered differently." "Do I know you?" Elias asked, certain he'd never met this stranger. The old man smiled. "I know music, and I know the silence when it leaves. I've seen that look before." "There's nothing ahead," Elias said bitterly. "I've tried everything: therapy, experimental treatments, even hypnosis." "Not everything," the old man replied, pulling something from his pocket. It was a smooth stone that seemed to capture and reflect the moonlight in impossible ways. "Tomorrow night, return here during the meteor shower. Hold this and listen, not with your ears, but with something deeper." Before Elias could respond, the old man pressed the stone into his palm and walked away, disappearing around the cliff path with surprising agility. Elias almost threw the stone into the ocean, but stopped himself. Desperation made fools of everyone eventually. What harm could come from one more failed attempt? The next day passed in a fog of lectures and avoided questions from colleagues. As night fell, Elias found himself drawn back to the cliffs, stone in hand, feeling ridiculous yet hopeful in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be for months. The meteor shower began just after midnight, streaks of light tearing across the velvet sky. Elias clutched the stone, which grew warm in his palm. He closed his eyes, expecting nothing. Then he felt it not sound, but a vibration that bypassed his ears entirely and resonated directly in his chest. It was faint, like a whisper from a great distance, but unmistakably there. For the first time in 18 months, Elias Novak smiled at something he couldn't see but could finally feel again. The stone pulsed with warmth in Elias's palm as the meteor shower intensified, streaks of cosmic fire painting the night sky. Each falling star seemed to send a corresponding vibration through the stone and into his body. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sensation. It wasn't music exactly, but a rhythm, a pattern that felt almost like communication. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't alone. She stood at the cliff's edge, silhouetted against the ocean and star-filled sky. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves that seemed to absorb and reflect the starlight. When she turned, Elias felt his breath catch. Her features were delicate yet strong, with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to shift between deep violet and midnight blue. Her skin had the faintest purple undertone, visible even in the moonlight, like the inside of a seashell. "You heard the calling stone?" she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place, melodic and flowing. As if each word had additional notes attached to it, Elias held up the stone. "This, an old man gave it to me yesterday," she smiled, moving closer with graceful steps. "There are no old men on these cliffs at night, only echoes and messengers." Something about her presence made the air feel charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. She wore simple clothes, a silvery tunic over dark leggings, yet she seemed otherworldly, as if she'd stepped out of the stars themselves. "I'm Elias," he said, surprised at how steady his voice sounded despite the strange electricity in his veins. She studied him with those impossible eyes. "I know. I've heard your music across the void." She extended her hand, fingers long and elegant. "I am Lyra." When their hands touched, the stone between them flared with light, and Elias truly heard a single, perfect note that resonated through his entire body. He gasped, nearly dropping the stone in shock. "What was that?" He whispered. "The beginning," Lyra said, her lips curving into a smile. She leaned close, her breath warm against his ear, and whispered his name. Elias. The sound of his name and her voice triggered something profound. Suddenly, he could hear a faint melody playing at the edges of his consciousness, not with his ears, but somewhere deeper, as if her whisper had unlocked a sealed chamber in his mind. "How did you do that?" He stepped back, overwhelmed. "Where I come from, names are more than labels. They're harmonic signatures." She pointed to the meteor shower above. "I followed the pathways of light, searching for the one whose music once reached our world." "Your world?" Elias repeated, wondering if he'd finally lost his mind completely. Lyra extended her hand again, this time palm up. In it lay what looked like fine purple sand that moved and shifted of its own accord. "Touch it," she urged. Hesitantly, Elias ran his fingertip through the strange substance. Immediately, his mind filled with images, a world with twin moons, landscapes of crystalline formations that vibrated with constant music, beings with Lyra's features moving among structures that seemed built of solidified sound. He jerked his hand back. "What are you?" "A traveler, a musician, an astronomer," she replied. "On my world, these are all the same thing. We call ourselves the Harmoniae." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the falling stars. "Your compositions reached us 3 cycles ago, carried on radio waves, modified by cosmic dust, but unmistakably intentional. Such beauty from a world we thought incapable of true harmony." She gestured to the stone. "Then your music stopped." The silence was ... disturbing. "I was sent to discover why." Elias laughed bitterly. "A car accident. Brain trauma. The universe's cruel joke." "Or perhaps its invitation," Lyra countered, taking the stone from his hand and holding it to the sky. It caught the light of a particularly bright meteor, absorbing it until the stone glowed from within. "I can't help you," Elias said. "The music is gone." Lyra returned the now glowing stone to him. "No. It's simply waiting to be heard differently." She touched his scar with gentle fingers. "Tonight, sleep with this beside you. Dream with an open mind." Before he could question her further, she stepped back toward the cliff edge. "Tomorrow, when the sun sets, I'll return. Listen for my whisper, Elias Novak. Your name is the key that opens the door between our worlds." With a smile that seemed to illuminate the night, she stepped backward off the cliff. Elias cried out, rushing to the edge, but instead of falling, Lyra's form shimmered and dispersed into the night air, like violet mist rejoining the stars in his hand. The stone pulsed with the rhythm of a distant heartbeat. Elias dreamed of music that night, not the classical compositions he once created, but something wilder and more profound. Notes that changed color, harmonies that built structures, rhythms that told stories without words. He woke with tears streaming down his face and melodies echoing in his mind for the first time in 18 months. Beside him, the stone had changed. What had been smooth was now etched with intricate patterns reminiscent of sound waves. It hummed faintly when he touched it. He spent the day in a daze, canceling his classes and sitting at his piano instead. His fingers moved hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as he tried to capture fragments of his dreams. The music wasn't like anything he'd composed before. It followed rules he didn't understand but somehow knew intuitively, as if he'd always carried this knowledge deep inside him as sunset approached. Elias returned to the cliffs, the stone warm in his pocket. The sky was clear, no sign of last night's meteor shower. But the air felt charged with possibility. He'd begun to remember. Lyra's voice came from behind him when he turned. She was simply there, as if she'd materialized from the air itself. Today, her violet-tinged skin seemed more pronounced, especially along her temples and the backs of her hands, forming subtle patterns like musical notation. Remember, Elias corrected? Discover. This isn't my music hits. Yours, somehow. Lyra approached, moving with that same liquid grace. Music belongs to no one. It exists in the spaces between all things. She touched his chest lightly. Your people trap it in patterns on paper. Mine let it flow through our bodies. Why me? Elias asked. Why now? She looked out over the ocean. My world is dying, Elias. The harmonies that sustain us are faltering. Her eyes reflected a sorrow older than her apparent years. When we heard your music, we realized Earth might hold the key to our salvation, a new approach to harmony we hadn't considered. And then I stopped composing, he said, understanding dawning. Yes, but the accident that silenced you also changed you. She pressed her palm against his scar. Your brain rewired itself. You can now perceive frequencies others can't, the spaces between notes, the harmonies between worlds. Elias felt a shiver run through him. You need me to compose something. It's not just compose, Lyra corrected. We need you to create a bridge harmonic sequence that can stabilize the resonance between our worlds. Something that exists neither fully here nor there, but in the space between breaths. She moved closer, her body radiating warmth that seemed to penetrate his very bones. But there are complications. I'm not supposed to be here. My people sent probes, not people. Disagreed with their approach. You're a rogue alien, Elias said, with a disbelieving laugh. Her smile was quick and bright. I prefer independent researcher. Before he could respond, she placed her hands on either side of his face. The touch sent currents of sensation through him, not just physical attraction, though that was undeniably present, but something deeper. Music began to play in his mind, complex and beautiful. This is what I hear when I look at you, she whispered, overwhelmed by emotion and the strange music filling his consciousness. Elias did the only thing that felt right. He leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips tasted of something sweet and unfamiliar, like starlight distilled into nectar. The kiss deepened, and with it, the music in his mind grew more intricate. He felt her thoughts touching his images of her world. The crystalline towers now cracking, the twin moons pulling out of alignment, the desperate search for a solution. When they finally broke apart, Elias understood two things with perfect clarity. He was falling in love with a being from another world, and helping her might cost him everything he thought he wanted. Time is short, Lyra said, her eyes now glowing faintly in the gathering darkness. Others are coming from my world and yours. They've detected the disruption I've caused. What do we do? Elias asked, still holding her close. We compose, she answered simply. Together, following days blurred into a frantic creative fugue. Ilias's apartment transformed into a laboratory of sound, his piano at the center surrounded by synthesizers, computers, and strange devices Lyra constructed from seemingly ordinary objects infused with the purple, sand-like substance she called resonance dust. The frequency must bridge quantum states, Lyra explained, her fingers dancing over a crystalline structure that responded to her touch with pulses of light. Like your Schrödinger's cat, both here and not here simultaneously. Elias nodded, though the theoretical physics stretched his understanding. What he did comprehend was the music emerging between them, compositions that made traditional harmonies seem flat and lifeless by comparison. Together, they were creating sounds that existed in multiple dimensions. Notes that folded space and resonated with the fundamental frequencies of matter itself. With each passing day, the subtle violet tint to Lyra's skin grew more pronounced. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, pain would flash across her features. "You're not telling me everything," he said one evening, catching her hands as they trembled over the keyboard. "What's happening to you?" Her eyes met his, those impossible depths now swirling with concern. "Earth's atmosphere is incompatible with my physiology long term. The more I manifest physically here, the more difficult it becomes to maintain my form." "Manifest?" Elias repeated. "You mean you're not always ... solid?" "I exist across a spectrum of states," she admitted. "When I'm with you, I pull myself fully into this dimension because I want to experience you completely." Her fingers traced his jawline. "It's worth the discomfort." The intimacy between them had deepened beyond physical attraction. When they made love, Elias experienced sensations beyond anything earthly, their consciousness intertwining, sharing memories and emotions that transcended language. He felt her homesickness for a world with twin moons, her fascination with Earth's chaotic beauty, her growing fear of failure. On the seventh day, as they were recording a particularly complex sequence, the building's power suddenly cut out. Moments later, Elise's phone rang a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Novak," came a clipped female voice. "This is Agent Diana Wells with the National Security Agency's Special Phenomena Division. We've detected unusual energy signatures emanating from your residence. We'll be arriving in approximately 10 minutes. Please remain where you are." Elise's blood ran cold. He turned to Lyra, who had already begun gathering her most essential instruments. "They've been monitoring atmospheric disturbances," she said, moving with urgent precision. "Your government has suspected extraterrestrial communications for decades. They've detected my presence." "We need to leave," Elias said, grabbing hard drives containing their work. Lyra shook her head. "Not we, you. I can shift my form, become less detectable. You're human, you're safer in plain sight." "I'm not leaving you," Elias insisted, the thought physically painful. "You must," Lyra countered. "Our work is nearly complete, but we need more time." She pressed the original stone into his hand. "Take this to your university's quantum physics laboratory. Find someone named Dr. Helena Chen. She's been researching parallel. Will dimension she'll understand enough to help without comprehending too much." Before Elias could protest further, Lyra kissed him deeply. The contact sent waves of music through his mind, along with images of where to meet her after dark. When they separated, her form was already becoming translucent around the edges. "Tonight," she whispered, "trust the music to guide you." Then she was going to not walking away, but dissolving into motes of purple light that vanished into the air. Elias barely managed to compose himself before 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. He opened the door before they could knock, facing a team of agents in dark suits led by a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes. "Mr. Novak," she said, "I'm Agent Wells. We have some questions about the energy emissions from your apartment." "I'm a composer," he replied, gesturing to his equipment. "I've been experimenting with new frequencies for a commissioned piece. Electromagnetic interference happens with some of my custom equipment." Wells studied him, unconvinced. "You've been inactive professionally for over a year following a traumatic brain injury. Then suddenly you're working with quantum harmonics and generating energy patterns that our most advanced equipment can barely analyze." Her gaze swept the apartment. "Where is your collaborator, Mr. Novak?" "Our sensors indicate 2 distinct energy signatures." Elias forced a laugh. "I've been working alone. Perhaps your equipment detected my cat?" He gestured to the corner where his tabby was watching with suspicious eyes. For the next 3 hours, agents combed through his apartment, scanning every inch with strange devices while asking increasingly pointed questions about his recent activities. Elias maintained his story, attributing his sudden creative resurgence to experimental therapy and inspiration. When they finally left, the sun was already setting. Elias retrieved a hard drive he'd hidden inside his piano bench and hurried to the physics building at the university. Dr. Chen was exactly where Lyra had predicted, working late in her lab, surrounded by equipment that hummed with potential. "Professor Novak," she greeted him, surprised. "What brings the music department to quantum physics at this hour?" "A proposition," Elias said, placing the stone on her desk. How would you like to help compose the universe's first interdimensional symphony? Dr. Helena Chen proved to be exactly who they needed. Brilliant, open-minded, and possessed of a healthy disregard for government restrictions on theoretical research. Her lab nestled deep in the university's physics building. It became their sanctuary as Agent Wells and her team expanded their search throughout the city. The mathematics are beautiful, Dr. Chen murmured, studying the patterns Elias and Lyra had created. These aren't just musical compositions, they're descriptions of quantum entanglement at a fundamental level. With her help, they constructed a device that could amplify the harmonic bridge sequence without generating the telltale energy signature that had alerted the authorities. Each night, Lyra would materialize in the lab, her form growing increasingly translucent, the violet hue of her skin now pulsing visibly with her heartbeat. "Your people are looking for you too, aren't they?" Elias asked as they worked one night. Noticing how she frequently paused to look toward the stars visible through the observatory dome. "Yes," Lyra admitted. "They believe I've gone rogue, sharing knowledge that your species isn't ready for. They don't understand that it's already too late for such concerns." She gestured to the device they were building. "The bridge goes both ways, Elias. Once established, communication becomes permanent." The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. Once the bridge was complete, decisions would need to be made about worlds, about futures, about them. On the fifth night in the lab, as their work neared completion, the atmosphere around them changed. The air grew heavy, charged with potential, and through the observatory dome. They watched as clouds gathered unnaturally, swirling in geometric patterns. "They're here," Lyra whispered, her form flickering more rapidly now. Both sides. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the building. Dr. Chen checked the security feed on her computer. "Government agents at the main entrance," she reported. "And something's interfering with the power grid across campus. How much more time do we need?" Elias asked, hands moving frantically over the controls of their device. "Minutes," Lyra said, her voice taking on that musical quality that emerged when her concentration split between dimensions. "The harmonic sequence is nearly complete." Dr. Chen grabbed her keys. "I'll delay them at the security checkpoint. The emergency locks should buy you 10 minutes. With a quick nod, she slipped out, sealing the lab behind her. Alone with Lyra, Elias worked with a focus born of desperation. The device hummed with increasing intensity, projecting a field of sound that humans couldn't hear, but could feel in their bones. "Elias," Lyra said softly, her hand covering his, "there's something I haven't told you." He looked up, seeing in her eyes what he already suspected. "The bridge requires an anchor on both sides." She nodded. "I can't stay, and you can't come with me. Not physically." The realization should have devastated him, but somehow he'd known all along. But through the music, ... Yes, her smile was radiant, despite her increasingly transparent form. "Through the harmonic bridge, we'll never truly be separated. Your consciousness can travel the pathways we're creating even while your body remains here." Outside the lab, they could hear the commotion of approaching agents. The air around them began to shimmer as the device reached critical resonance. "Will I see you again?" Elias asked, holding her fading hands. "In dreams, in music, in the spaces between thoughts," Lyra promised. "And perhaps when your world is ready, in person again." She leaned forward, her lips brushing his in a kiss that felt like starlight. "Listen for my whisper, Elias Novak. I'll always be calling you home." The device reached its crescendo, and the room filled with harmonic patterns of light and sound. Through the dome above, the swirling clouds parted to reveal a rift in space, a window to another world where crystalline spires rose beneath twin moons. As government agents pounded at the door, Lyra's form dissolved completely into motes of violet light that spiraled upward toward the rift. The final notes of their composition echoed through the lab, through Elias's mind, through the very fabric of reality. The door burst open just as the rift sealed, leaving Agent Wells and her team staring at an empty lab save for Elias sitting calmly at the control panel, a faint smile on his face. "Where is she?" Wells demanded, her agents spreading through the room with scanning devices. "Everywhere," Elias answered truthfully. "Nowhere." In the music, they detained him, of course. For weeks, he was questioned in sterile rooms about extraterrestrial contact and national security. Dr. Chen faced similar scrutiny. Though both maintained they had simply been conducting theoretical research on the relationship between music and quantum physics, eventually lacking concrete evidence beyond unusual energy readings, they were released under surveillance. The government confiscated their equipment, but the knowledge and the bridge remained intact. 6 months later, Elias Novak's comeback concert debuted at Carnegie Hall. Critics called his new composition Whispers Between Stars, revolution in music complex, in ways that defied traditional analysis, yet emotionally resonant on a profound level. What the audience didn't know, what only Elias could hear as he played, were the responses woven through the harmonics. Lyra's world, answering his call across the vast distances between their stars. And late at night, when he played certain sequences on his piano, the air in his apartment would shimmer with violet light, and he would feel her presence not physically, but in that space between breaths where music and consciousness intertwined. Sometimes she would whisper his name, and he would forget everything else. In those moments, Elias understood that love, like music, transcended the physical limitations of worlds and bodies. It existed in the harmonies between souls, a bridge across the cosmos that nothing could ever truly break.